Good evening. We're learning as for Shleima Filan Chai Baserach. We're on Pei Dalet Amid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Again, we're still continuing. This is a hemshech of our discussion, and all this connects back to this discussion of the Mishnah and the Brises to discuss which things are im alu la yardu, and those things that are im alu are yardu. Sagt Amr Rabbi Yochanan, sagt the Gemara, Hasheichet behema b'layla b'fnim. If someone shechs a behema in the azara, in the proper place, but at night, you're not allowed to shecht at night. Vehela b'chutz, and then he brought it as a carbon chutz le azara. Well, you're not allowed. He did 2 things wrong. First, he shechted it balayla in the proper place, balayla. And then he went and he was makravit b'chutz, which is aser. It's a chayiv kares. So he says chayiv. He's not going to be chayiv the kares. Now, the question is, it's good. The way it comes back to what we're talking about is dinavim Allah yardu, is because when we said before that something that is brought balayla, if you shecht an animal balayla, it's it's going to be im alu yardu. Balayla is mamish no good. So what's going to be the explanation of why it should be chayiv? This is a very not good shchita. You did it by Laila. It's such an invalid shchita that if you were to bring it up on the mizbech, the basar, they murim onto the mizbech afterwards it would be yardu. Even so, he says chayiv. What's the reason? So the Gemara says the Torah says. We learn from a pasuk, we'll have it later on, that someone who brings shechts a carbon mechutz and then brings it is makrovit bachutz is going to be chayiv the kares for being makrov bachutz. So if you did it bifnim, like we said, someone who is shechts bachutz, we said the shchita bachutz, we said is going to be of alu yardu. So this is not any worse. The shchita balayla, even though it's bifnim, is also not any. It's not any better, or it's not any more of an alu yardu than if you shecht it bachutz. And since shechting bachutz and then being maleh bachutz is chayiv for the being makrov bachutz, so there's no reason why being shechet it balayla shouldn't also cause the hakrava bachutz to be chayiv. You look skeptical.
No, because I'm just trying to figure. Rashi says the kaimelan sheichet chayav al shchitasi ve'al aliyasa.
Right. Let's talk about sheichet b'chutz and maleh b'chutz.
So over here, like, why wouldn't you be? Here you're not being chayav on both. You're being chayav just on the maleh b'chutz, right?
Yeah, we're only talking about the being maleh b'chutz.
Why would I think otherwise?
So, because one would think that since we said that if you shecht balayla, the din is im alu yardu, that it's not much of a shchita. It's not at all a kosher shchita.
I would think that it wouldn't even be chayiv on the halah.
Yeah, since you already you went off track, what you're doing is not a halah. It's as we're going to see later on, for example, we'll see in a minute, something that is considered that there was no shchitas of a kachim, which we'll see in the case of like an oif that you shechted instead of being moilik, that's totally excluded and it's going to be pot.
Got it.
That's what the Gemara asks. Masav Rabbi Chia bar Oven, hashoichet oif b'fnim. Someone who shechts an oif b'fnim, and he was shoichet it instead of doing malika, so he did it incorrectly. Umala b'chutz, and then he brings it out, and he's malet outside of the azara potter. He's taka potter. Shacha b'chutz umala b'chutz chayiv. But if you were to do the whole, if you were to shecht the oif b'chutz, and then bimalat b'chutz you'd be chayiv. Seems like if you look at it on its face, it seems absurd, right? You did part of it better that you did it b'fnim. You're supposed to bring the carbon,
Right.
the oif b'fnim. So he did a shchita, but if he does a shchita b'chutz, and then is mal b'chutz yechayiv, so why is this worse? Because he did a shchita b'fnim. So for the Gemara, you see, Weiss says there's no l'chayra would seem to indicate that you don't make this kal v'chaymer just because bachutz it's kosher, it's going to be chayiv, meaning that it's considered a valid shchita and halah. That's a takanas hachamim. I'm sorry, gzeres hakasuv, and has no relationship to what happens when you do it b'fnim. That the Torah didn't talk about. Tiyuft. Where it says Ein Chanami, it's a good kasha on this. It's a very strange structure of this Gemara. The Gemara first says Tiyufta. You have a good kasha, and Ein Chanami, the svara doesn't make sense. Iba Yisema, or alternatively, you could say it's not a Tiyufta. Shchita Sa'if Ifnim, Mikdal Katle. Like we were saying before, when one shechts an animal b'fnim, that's worse than a Shchita b'chutz. When you do a shchita b'chutz, that's similar to a shchita that you do for an animal to eat it. You always do shchitas b'chutz. So you did what would be valid if you're doing it for eating. So that has some validity. But maybe it's taka worse when you do a shchita b'fnim, because the only type of way of killing a bird, an oif b'fnim, that will be kosher is malika. So you did something that's totally invalid. So that taka maybe would be that would explain why it's putter over there. But that would be a chiluk that we don't have in our case, and that's why it's still valid what we said, that if you do a shchita balayla b'fnim, it will be chayiv because of the kal v'chaim. I wonder if you find this also interesting, this concept that it says first tiyufta, kasha is good kasha, and then it turns around to say by the same I could say a teretz. It would seem to indicate that the Gemara thinks that this teretz is not so strong. Meaning, like we're trying to say it links up to whether it's im alul yardu, and there's no enough kamina really between this whether you do a shchita b'chutz or you do a shchita b'fnim. In both cases, it's going to be im alul yardu. Whether it's whether you do talking about a oif or you're talking about a behema, in all those cases. It's always going to be yardu because they're all equally invalid malikas. So how could it's? I think the problem is really that how could something be more invalid than invalid? How could be something more puzzle than puzzle? Right? If you do a shchita b'chutz of an animal, having in mind to do it that you want to bring it as a carbon. So we don't. What does it make a difference that if you would shecht it for eating, it would be a kosher shchita? As far as carbon, it's an invalid. It's a totally invalid malika. So the shchita b'fnim should be the same. I think I would guess that would be the kasha. Amar Ula, another day. Amar Ula, emura kachim kalim shehelim fnei zrikas damim lo yardu. We had this blot or two blot ago. Ula says that emurim kachim kalim, specifically kachim kalim, that were brought up onto the Mizbeach before the Zrika's dam. As we know, the Zrika is the matir for the Emurim to be brought. But he did not do that. He brought the Emurim before the Zrika's dam. Lo yardu. Nevertheless, Ula says it doesn't come down as a dinim al lo yardu. Why? Nasu lachma shel Mizbeach. Becomes the lechem of Mizbeach, and it has a din that the Mizbeach was kailated, and the din, this pasuk, the din that we learned from the pasuk in the beginning of Tzav would apply that and it's going to be al mizbeach. It's going to have a din that the mizbeach was kailated. Now he says kachim kalim because kachim, and this is not going to be really disputed in the Gemara. Kachim have a din of me'ilah even before the zrikas dam, so they have a kedusha from beforehand. So he says they will have certainly that even though the people who don't agree with Ula, they ask a bunch of questions, they'll be maskim that kachim are going to be lo yerd. Amr of Zera. Afnana mitnina. We also learned this in the brisa that we had on the previous blot. Shenishbach dama v'sheyatza dama chutz l'koyim. That in the list of those karbanos that we say that aram Allah yardu, we say something that was nishbach dama, that it had there was a zrika, it was also lefnei zrikas dam, but not just there was lefnei zrikas dam, but the dam itself, this is really too much nishbach dam from the shchita went on the ground, or sheyatza dam chutz l'koyim, or the dam from the shchita that you would koil it, that you took into a klisharis, went bachutz and became pasul. And we say that these are things that Allah yardu. Uma hasam, so we make a kavachayim. Masam dim ba lizrek, ein loy lizrek. In that brisa, we're talking about things where the dam became pasul. There's no saving the situation. It has no path forward. Amartem Allah yardu. Now, and even so, we say if it goes up, it's lo yared. Hacha dim ba lizrek zayrek lekal shekain. Over here, it's just that it's too early. Dim ba lizrek, that they didn't do the zrika. Zayrek over here in Baal Lizrek Zayrek, like Kol Shekain. Certainly it should be a Malul Layard. So l'chayr it's a Kal V'chaymer. So l'chayr this brisa should be a raya to Ula. And the Gemara no Tigama Kache Kachim. Maybe that brisa is only talking about Kache Kachim. So Kache Kachim, like we said, since it has a din of Me'ilah as soon as you do the Shechita, so it's already going to have a din of Im'allah Yardu. It has a Kedusha, but it's Im'allah Yardu from before. And so it's no raya to Ula's din by Kachay Kalam. Fact the Gemara, Haripesat the Kachem Kalam, but the Brisa had continued. And it gave one of the examples of a Im'allah Yardu was even a Pesach, Carbon Pesach, or Chatas, which is Shaloi L'Shma is Pasul, and even so the din is Im'allah Yardu. So it said a Pesach. A Pesach is Kachay Kalam. So Gemara's understanding, once we said that the last case of Kachay Kalam, Shalei Lishman, all the cases could be talking about a Pesach. So when it says Shenishbach Dama, Sheyatza Dama Chutz L'Chaim, it also could be talking about a carbon Pesach. So you see, it's not, you can't say the Bryce is only talking about Kachay Kachim. So no, when it said the Pesach, it's only about the din of Shalei Lishma that it said about Pesach. The earlier din of Nishbach Dama and the Dam was Yaitza was not talking about Pesach, it was talking about Kachay Kachim. Okay. Now we move on to our mission. We will try to bring a raya from the Bryce, and now we're going to try to bring a raya from our mission. Tznan v'kulan she'alu chayin. This is the last part of the Mishnah that was a little bit mysterious. Maybe it's kedai to quickly go look at the Mishnah again. This is on Pei Dalid Amid Aleph. V'kulan she'alu chayin l'roish hamizbeach yardu. The Mishnah ends off at the end of the Mishnah. All of these things, if they came while they were alive to the Mizbeach, the din is you take them down. As Rashi explains, because you take them down and then you shech them, because you take them down because you're not allowed to shech them. Oila also chayil roish hamizbeach terid, and the same thing for an oila that was brought while it's alive to the roish hamizbeach goes down. Shach the roish hamizbeach, but if it was shechted on the roish hamizbeach, the oila, then it is yavshiv in the chayabim kaima. Then you're not gonna take it down, because once you take it down, it's gonna have a din im yardu loyalu. You can't bring it back up, and this is supposed to be. It already has the kedushas mizbeach because you shechted it there. So therefore, you're going to be forced to do the hefshed and nituach, which the Gemara will get to, because that's what the Mishnah said. So zok the Gemara, Tnan b'chulin she'alu chayin legam mizbeach yardu. The mashma it says hashchutin lo yardu. It's mashma that if it was already shechted, the oil was shechted beforehand lo yared. My slav loishna kache kachem loishna kache kalam. There's no chilik over here between kache kachem and kache kalam. So saying even kache kalim that was shachot, and it means even l'chayra as long as they were shchutin, even if they didn't have zrikas dam. So l'chayra you see that all shchutin is lo yardu, like Ula said, you're gonna bring the emurim. So tomorrow, loy hashchutin mehen yardu mehen lo yardu. No, there's no reason to assume that it's saying that whether it was kache kachem, whether it was kache kalem, whether it was had a zrika beforehand or not, it's going to depend on the circumstances. That kachem, so kache kachem. So we'll assume it means even if it was before the zrika, but the kache kachem are the one that would be if it was shachat, it would be la yardu. Praktimarva kulim tani, but it's I said kula. So kula and lechayr means even kache kalem. So the makul and a chayin. It's talking about the chayin, that which it said that the chayin are all yair. That means all chayin, regardless of what the situation is. It's like the Gemara Pshita. L'chayr, it's pashut that if they're alive, they have to come down, because why wouldn't you take a live animal, shecht it, do the avoid, and then bring it back up? What are you losing by taking it down? It's talking about it's talking about while they're alive. You're going to say, if that's the case, that if it's chayin, it's pashut. Ubedukan shab ba'ayin, we're talking about where it has a mum. So therefore, a specific mum, that's still most mum in the din is that it's im alu yardu. Dukan shab ba'ayin, that the al-valiba de Rabbi Kiva the amar im alu la yardu. So we say this is an animal that was brought up alive, and if you're going to bring it down, you're not going to be able to shecht it because it has a mum. But even though it has a mum, this mum, Rabbi Kiva says, the din is that if it's an Allah yardu. So maybe one might think you should shecht it on the mizbeach, because if you're going to take it down, you're not going to be able to bring it back up. But while it's here, it already had the din of im Allah yardu, because it's, according to Rabbi Kiva, it's a type of mum that he says it's im Allah yardu. So you're saying that this din of chayin, the chiddush is that even though it has a psul, that it's talking about something that's possible to be brought as a carbon because it has a mum. Ema seifa. What about the conclusion of this end of the Mishnah? The same thing with the oila that was brought onto the mizbeach while it's alive. Tered. You should bring it down. Shachta b'rosh mizbeach, and if you shecht it, if someone incorrectly shechted it on the rosh mizbeach, yavshe b'yintach. You should skin it and then cut it up into pieces, which is what you always do with an oila before you burn the entire oila. Bimkaima. The psula. Now, just again, this is, as we'll see, this is things that you're not supposed to shecht on the mizbech. You're not supposed to cut things up with skin on top of the mizbech. That's not the right place for it. But the Mishnah said that you do so. In fact, the psula bas heshav v'nituachi. B'chlal, an animal that's puzzle, it loses the din of hefshet v'nituach. Hefshet v'nituach
even according to Rabbi Kiva in this case, because that's what we're going with.
Well, this is separate. Rabbi Kiva's din is that it's im Allah yardu, that you have to. Let's say you had an oila that was already shechted and was brought up. It has bedukin shaba'ayin, so it shouldn't have been shechted. It was not a kosher. It was all not kosher, but this bedukin shaba'ayin, Rabbi Kiva says it has the din of Allah yardu if you bring the basar up. But the din is he wasn't supposed to do. Even Rabbi Kiva agrees that it's a puzzle, it's a mum, and it's not supposed to be done, and therefore it falls into the general rule that there's no heshet v'nituach for a puzzle of carbon. Why do we see that? The din of cutting something apart, cutting it into pieces before oila, that you cut it into pieces and you skin it before you burn it, is only if it's kosher, not if it's puzzle. So the Gemara seifa etin l'kshera. Ein Chanami, we're going to have to say that we're going to have to be mechalik, right? We were talking about the first part of the Sefer, where we said that it's talking about according to Rebbe Akiva, and it's talking about, um, we said Chayin are can't that if it's Chay that it can't go down in Allah Yadu. That was talking about Beduk and Shaba'ayin, like Rebbe
Yes, but
Akiva.
no, if it's Chayin, it does go down, and the Chiddush was that
I'm sorry,
even
right. If it's Chayin, it does, but the Shchutin doesn't go down, correct? The Shchutin that it's telling you a chiddush that even though the chayin was beduk and shaba'ayin, according to nevertheless, even so, it comes down. Zok the Gemara. So then the Gemara said, but the next part of the Mishnah, where it talks about an oila, is not talking about a psul. It's not talking about a bambam. So sefer etin l'kshera, umay kamashma. And if that's the case, what is the Torah telling you when it tells you that it's talking about a kosher animal that you could take it down? Why shouldn't you take it down and then shecht it and do everything properly and bring it back onto the mizbeach? It's the second part of that din of the oila that it's coming to tell you. Ein chanami, there's no chiddush that you take down while it's chayim if it's kosher. But the second part that we said, if he shechted it on the Rosh HaMizbeach incorrectly, that we said you should do hefsher v'nituach, the yesh hefsher v'nituach b'Rosh HaMizbeach. It's telling you a chiddush that there is hefsher v'nituach even on the Rosh HaMizbeach, because one might say it's not an appropriate thing to do there, and even though you shechted it, but the mizbeach is koiled it, but maybe you don't do the hefsher v'nituach. That part you don't do on the mizbeach. Zok the Gemara, ulamanda, right? Because you
right.
even if though you shechted the oila in the wrong place, it's still a kosher oila. You weren't allowed to do it, but it's not it doesn't passel it. So Zok the Gemara, ulamanda ama ein hefsher v'nituach b'rosh hamizbeach. But there's a Meira that says that that's not the case. That's not the halacha. It can't be talking about a kosher to tell you that you do the hefsher v'nituach, because he says if it's kosher, what's the since if it's kosher, there's nothing stopping you from taking it off the mizbeach, right? It's only something that if it's going to be im yarudu loy alu, if it's possible,
Right.
then you have a reason to take it off. But if it's kosher, why mehecha taste that yikataka bring it down? This Amir says you can't do that. You can't do the hefsher v'nituach on top of the mizbeach if it's kosher. So how are you going to understand? Right, we're saying the chiddush is that the yesh hefsher v'nituach, but he holds that's not the case. So Gemara, the nifsala. So it has to be talking about this oila has to be talking about where it was not kosher. If it's not kosher, then there's no hefsher v'nituach. Like we said, there's no din. You can't do hefsher v'nituach on a not kosher animal. This is talking about where there was a shasa kosher v'nifsala. It wasn't puzzle from like a bedukun shaba'ayin. This was a different psul, obviously, or they got the bedukun shaba'ayin after you did the shechita and you were kabel the dam. So it had this oila. The basar of this oila had a time that was kasha. And Rabbi Elazar of Shimon this is going according to Rabbi Elazar of Shimon the Amar Kimich and Izr Kadam for Hortza basar Sharachas Yafshetenu v'Oira Lekehanim. He holds that this din that we said before, that there's no hefsher v'nituach on a pasala oila. He says it depends. It's not always the case. If it had a shasa kosher, if there was a time that this basar was prepared, it was hukshar to be brought on the mizbech, even though later on it became puzzle, it's still going to have a din of hefsher v'nituach.
Basically, it's still the case. This is the case of the oila that was you brought it up while it was alive, and you shechted it.
Yeah.
And
right. So we said if it was a puzzle that was brought on the mizbech, certainly you
there
can't
be
should
be no hefsher v'nituach. So we're saying no. Basically, they shechted it on top, which they shouldn't have, but they did. They did this rika. Then it became puzzle.
Yeah,
So according to this Mandomer, Belazar Reb Shimon, in other words, since that Hashas Kosher, now you can do the Hefshev Nituach.
yeah,
Complicated case.
yeah. Correct the Gemara. Eladiktani, but we have a brisa that's also going on this din of our Mishnah. Kate said, so what does he do after, like we said, that the oil, if he shechted it on top and he skins it and he cuts it into pieces and burns those pieces, what does he do prior to burning them? Part of the preparation of oil, in addition to skinning it, in addition to hefshed mituach, is that then you have to take the intestines essentially and wash them off. You have to rinse them off. It's disgusting to have the waste still as part of a carbon that's being burnt. He says you take it down. So, how could that be? If we're talking about something that's puzzle, how could you take part of the basar off of the mizbeach? As we know, one of the rules is if yardu lo yalu. So how could you take it off and then bring it back? It lost the kedushas mizbeach. So they take out the words lamali. I'll tell you why it's brought down. Hechinavet nikravinu be porsayu. What are you suggesting? You won't wash it off. That's a problem. The Torah says there's a pasuk that we come across a lot, which says that avodas have to be done in a pleasant way, in an appropriate way. The Baruch Shalom is saying, "Are you going to bring to me your karbanos that are?" And it's talking about karbanos that are unpleasant. Hayirtza, will you get a hartza? Hayisa panecha, am I going to turn to you? Of course not. I'm not. I don't want a carbon that's not good. So he doesn't have the option of just bringing it as is not a possibility. So anan haki kamin madichan lamali. So when we asked how is this going to work? So so why? So the question is, if you have to take them off, you can't bring them as is. So you have to take them off, right? There's no other choice. So what's the point of washing them once you took them off? You're not going to bring them up. So what are you doing? You're not accomplishing anything. And they want to know the Torah enechanami, you have to take it off and you wash it, and you can't bring it off because you can't bring it back up because it's a puzzle of carbon. But the reason why you wash it is if another kain comes and he's not aware that these kra'ayim are from a puzzle of carbon, and niskinu, he's going to he'll bring them up on the mizbeach, and we don't want him to bring up unwashed kra'ayim. It's not that we want to avoid the possibility of a kain by mistake bringing it up while it's unwashed. So that's why you wash it. Frek the Gemara. So what are we doing? We're going to wash it. They're going to see it's washed, and they're not going to realize that it was puzzle. So then they'll be more likely to bring it up. The Gemara says that's not what it means. The Gemara says, the reason is you wash it it's not really like we said before that maybe the kain will come and bring it up, but the reason is because it's not proper to leave something lying down. And we're saying, in spite of the fact that a kain might bring it up, it's still better to wash it than to leave it in its current unpleasant state. Even though you're not bringing it, there's no intention to ever bring it, you don't leave a part of a carbon in this way. Okay, we'll stop over here.